Thanks, you guys, for taking the time this morning. As we were talking, I just remember just getting filled up by the discussions we've had as we've looked at the November 21st Commitment Sunday coming together, and as we've just been feeding off from each other on how we understand giving in our own life. It just makes sense to invite the congregation in to hear what we're talking about. So thanks for taking the time today. So Marcus, as you've thought through your story in giving, what has really hit your heart, and how do you come alive in that?
Yeah, I think I have the opportunity every once in a while to share why. Why do I give? And I have to look back at my story and what God has walked me through. And I remember as a young kid going on mission trips, and the largest gifts I had towards my missions were always from the people that I had an image of. They didn't really have a lot, but they were generous, like just spirit-filled people. They were full of joy and contentment. And as I got older, I'm like, I want that. And I wrestled with this selfishness and this greed that I never wanted to admit before, and I would never have said those words. But I knew that I wanted something different. And as I looked at people who were generous around me, I thought there's got to be something in that. They just had something different. They had joy that you couldn't take away. They had contentment, and generosity was that key. They were always looking for others. They were looking at others and saying, how can I help? How can I give? They were supporting the church. And I remember the first time I said, I'm going to step out into this because I don't know where this is going to go, God. And Jody and I were just newly married together, and I wrote a check, and it was a lot for us at that time, but I said, I just feel like we need to step into this. And it wasn't anywhere even near a tithe at that point, but it was a lot for us. And it's been amazing how we've grown from then to now, where we've continued just to trust more and give a little more. And it's changed me inside. It's changed who I am, the joy that I have, the contentment. The rest of the world around me doesn't shake me like it used to.
So good.
I just hear your story, and I think we have so many things in common. When I think about giving or generosity, I can't help but think about the new person or the de-church person that comes to church, because I was that person 22 years ago. Sitting in the pews, I had my own section. You know, church was about me. I like to sit where I wanted to sit. I wanted to be fed. I wanted to just listen. I would listen to things about serving, and I could get past that kind of stuff. But when the topic of money, or even the offering buckets, remember when we used to pass offering buckets?
Way back in the day.
Yeah. When I would pull out pocket change, pull out a few bills, maybe a 20. You know, if I was really feeling generous in my mind back then. But the topic of money in church never made sense to me. It's like, why would you give money to a church? And then my arrogance would come out. Well, what are they doing with it? Are they spending it wisely? Does it go and pad the pastor's pocketbook? We found out that's not true,
That's
right?
not true.
It's not at all. But I wanted to know out of arrogance, because I didn't understand it. It was a foreign concept to me to give money. I had my own life. Looking back, I was selfish, I was greedy, I was materialistic. I didn't know that back then. But I just looked at it, and it was a foreign concept. But I liked the way Cornerstone's always talked about it, whether it was Brad or even you, Ken, listened to you years ago. I never felt pressure. It was always a topic that was discussed about a heart issue. And, you know, it started to change where I started to feel a nudging as I became more involved to do something, to give something beyond what I was just doing, the easy stuff. And the analogy I always use, I don't even know where I heard it, I can't even give credit to it, but I use it so often, is the spring cleaning that often we all do. You're going through your house, you're kind of fed up with all the junk that's piled up, and you start to load your car up with stuff. And you're looking at it, and some of it has value, some of it doesn't, but you're just cleaning out the house. And you're loading it up, you drive down to the local mission, and then you drop it off. And that feels good. And I do believe in the old adage, you know, any person's junk can be another person's treasure. I believe God can bless people in that way. But the teaching I heard about years ago was the difference between giving and generosity. And that was the requirement of sacrifice. Like, if it doesn't cost you anything, is it generosity? Right. And when I'm loading up my car and I'm just giving away stuff that I don't want anymore or don't need anymore, it doesn't mean that it can't be used to bless other people, but if it didn't cost me anything, is it generosity? And that's when it started to really work at my heart, because that's the battle I was fighting. That selfishness and greed was the barrier between my growth. And like you, it was, well, I'm going to write a check. I was going to get specific. And it wasn't 10%. I didn't start there. I don't even encourage people to jump there, quite honestly, if you're in that condition, because then you can get really grumpy about it. It was maybe 1%, then 3%, or 5%. It wasn't even at a percent back then. It was what was sacrifice. And what I started to feel was the power of money and things.
Kind of faded.
It started to fade. I mean, so it wasn't give money, get a bigger bank account, give money, have the things I want.
Yeah.
It stopped being a financial transaction, right? And it started to become a heart transaction.
Oh, I love it. That's kind of my story as well. And for me, God actually, I didn't know about the tithe 10%, which was an Old Testament concept, versus the New Testament concept, which is 100%. It costs everything. I didn't know any of that teaching at the time. I was a brand new believer, and I was at that time working at Pizza Hut and working my way through college, poor in terms of my bank account, and I had made tips over $100 the night before. It was a big deal to me, and I cashed it all in, got a $100 bill, put it in my pocket. And because I was a gross college student as well, the next morning I got up to go to church and I put the same pants on. Didn't realize the $100 bill was in there. The pastor said, today we're going to be having missionaries speak, and the missionaries spoke, and then they took up an offering. And I was like, oh, I don't have any money. And then I remembered there's a $100 bill in here. And then God prompted my heart, give it. I was like, you can't rip a tenth of a $100 bill. Give it. And I'm not kidding you, my chest was pounding and the voice was so loud, give it, give it, give it. And I had sweaty palms, and it was the scariest moment for me. And I gave every argument in the book. I'm a poor college student. There's no way you're asking me. This is definitely the devil. I mean, I had all these lies in my head and excuses. And when that offering plate came, I gave it. And little did I know, that was the moment that I really tested God. I didn't hear a sermon on the typical Malachi, test God and see, but that is where God says, test me. And
that was generosity.
That's exactly, right. As you said that, it dawned on me, that's what brings me to life in the sense of saying, I want to be a part of the flow of what God is doing. And what God does on the backside, it's God's economy now. And so now I'm in the flow of what God is doing. I've said in many different settings, for the analogy for me is the swamp or a river. A river receives and gives. A swamp always takes, and it's smelly and gross. And for 25 years now, I've just been a part of the river. You can't outgive God. And so it's hard as a preacher. Do you guys get this way where as a preacher you feel like every time we talk about money, there's people that just misunderstand your motive?
Yeah, exactly. I was that person listening to that because I couldn't get it out of my own mind.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
You've talked about other people, you wanting to be like other people.
Yes. Yeah. What's the why? I see the joy that they have. I see what priority they put in their life, and I see how they have an impact in the community. And some of them had very little, some of them had a lot. I mean, this isn't God is not calling us to be a bunch of poor people to give things. They're all across the board. I think that's what I love about this idea of a tithe, that I didn't fully understand why or what the tithe was about. But as we got closer and closer to the point of giving a full tithe, I thought, all right, God, where are we going to go with this? This is stretching us. Even into 2010, when I took a job with a nonprofit, and my income went down 80% from what it was. And Jody and I made the commitment that we were still going to give the same. And numbers didn't make sense at all. And we said, we're going to trust. We're going to trust God. It's that test thing. And I'm like, man, I'd never want to test God. No. But that was, unknowingly, that was that test. And what happened out of it was our bank accounts weren't like all of a sudden, we didn't win the lottery. There wasn't anything that came out of it that way, but our wants changed, our desires changed. I saw other people hurting, and I was able to put myself into a different perspective to help them out. And through it all, then, there have been some blessings that have come out of it. A promotion for Jody, where all of a sudden her income went up. And there are moments like that. But the biggest change was the heart. The rest of the world, you can't take away the joy that I feel. You can't take away the ability just to sit in peace when others are stressed out around us. And even to this morning, now it's fun to watch my wife, who that very first check I wrote to a church when we were together, and she's like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" to now, this morning she wakes up and says, "I feel like I need to have a heart transaction here. I think there's a couple organizations that I just want to give to. Can you make that happen?" And I'm like, whoa, this is the kind of relationship I want, where we're not letting things grab a hold of us and keep us down. We're not letting things dictate who we are or how we operate. It is something where we have palms open to say, "God, you give and you allow us to give."
Yeah.
Ooh, let's see what happens with that and how we can change our hearts and the community around us as a result.
It stops having power over you.
Yes.
I mean, that's my story.
I've
I've transitioned from selfish, greedy to, it's funny to say, I guess, but I almost hate money now. It doesn't have power over me.
Right.
And there's so much freedom in that. I mean, my life has been transformed by just becoming more generous. I don't even know who I'd be. I'm sure I would have been successful by the world standards. I'm sure we could have more stuff, but I talk to so many people who just have all that and they're not happy. Or they feel broken.
Yeah.
And it's not just always generosity that fixes that, but it is for some. Yeah. And that's what I think about when I think about talking about money. I'm thinking about that person who's me, sitting in the back corner, who doesn't understand it. And I can't remember which one of you just said it, but I have such pride in our church because I get to be a part of this.
Exactly.
And my amount is such a little fraction, but I feel like what's happening in kids, I'm contributing to that. What's happening in students, I'm contributing to that. What's happening in care, I'm contributing. Missions, I'm contributing to that. Other things that we're going to do. And you get, we're paying for the lights, the boring stuff too. But people have such a desire to be part of something bigger than themselves. Exactly. And this is what I think we're calling ourselves to do. This is what God calls us to do. I'm going to do my mission work through my church. And I'm going to transform the world through you. To me, that's the dumbest idea in the world. But it's God, so I have to trust that, right? But I get to be a part of that. Yeah. And together, we can accomplish way more. That's the equation. Yeah. Every single time. And so it stops being a financial transaction and it starts being a heart transaction. And when it's that kind of transaction, God wins every time.
Exactly. Like when I put that $100 into that very first time, that was my first really time giving. Chains. I almost feel like, I wonder if there were chains in the heavenly realm that just got clinked down because I really was set free from that point on. Because then it turned from testing God to trusting God. And so now it's just like, I just clearly trust him. And this may sound like prosperity. It's not intended that way at all. But about a month later, a guy came up to me and he said, "Ken, I just want to let you know I felt a prompting. I don't know where it came from. I got to trust it's a God thing, to help you with your seminary as you go off to school." And that's when I realized this is trusting God. Because I gave that money away and I never thought about it again. I just released it and I was free from that point on. Kind of what you just said about money. It just doesn't own me anymore. And if God wants to bless me with giving me opportunities, great. If God doesn't open doors with opportunities with money, because that's all money is, it's a tool to do things. And if God doesn't want me to do those things, then I won't do those things. Right. But if he wants me to do those things, he'll give me the money to do those things. And so it's trust and walking in relationship. So it just feels good.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the Commitment Sunday.
Okay.
So what are we calling people to do?
To be with us. The thing I've noticed about the pandemic is I sense that everybody's just trying to figure out, where am I, who am I, where am I rooted? So we want to give people an opportunity to say, this is where you can get rooted, and to what you both have just been talking about, you get to be a part of something so phenomenal here. And so that's what I see that day being all about.
Yeah, there's power in a commitment to say, I'm going to do this, because there's accountability in that.
Good point.
Not that we're going to call people, not that somebody on staff is going to go through the list and say, well, Marcus, you didn't, how you doing on that? It's your own commitment between you and God. And it's accountability to say, am I in or not?
Right.
It's that opportunity to remind yourself every day, what are you a part of? And so that's exciting, because we haven't done that in a long time at Cornerstone. And it would bless us as a church, let's be honest. And not blessed because of the money, blessed because it helps us give a clear financial picture of our future.
Sure.
And what we can budget for.
We can be a better steward.
What can we do
Yeah.
more of?
Yes.
And those kind of things. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think the clarity is for people, Commitment Sunday is not about bringing in a pile of cash that day.
No.
It's about what's your commitment and what do you feel challenged to do this year? It may be what you've done in the previous years, but it's just writing it down, saying, no matter what 2022 brings, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, these are my people. I get to do life with these.
2020 is, I know we've marveled at it, because 2020 was the year for people to kind of back out. And we were blessed as a church where actually 2020 was more financially prosperous as a church than 2019 was.
Right.
So that just speaks to the heart of people at Cornerstone. I think this is an opportunity for all of us, whether you've participated or more, it doesn't matter the amount. I think of the widow's mite story that we've been studying, that it's not about it's not the person who's throwing the money around and making a big deal about it, and you know the shaky old lady who walks up, you know, in my mind with a cane, who dink dink drops those in, and Jesus says she gave the most. And it wasn't about the money,
Right.
and he wasn't even saying you need to become broke. He was saying
Her heart.
her heart.
Yeah.
Her heart is not, her heart's with me. And she, in a political system and a religious system that manipulated people like her, it didn't have power over her. She was willing to sacrifice.
Yes.
And there's so much power in that. She's famous because of that. And you know,
Yeah.
her story's told on for generations because of
Yeah.
that. You know?
There's power in, when you talk about a heart issue, if I allow things to kind of sit back in the dark, that's where crazy things happen. And so I think this whole I'm in thing is a way to say, I'm letting this out into the light, that this is where I want to make my commitment, this is where I want to make my impact and my stake. And then it no longer has power over you, because you're heading somewhere with it, and I've exposed it, and I'm going to let God use it and see where this goes all throughout 2022. So I'm excited to see what God's going to use in that, when we can boldly go before Satan and all of the enemy around us is going to try to trip us up to say, nope, I trust God. Watch this. Watch what God does.
Hey, I'm excited about the ministry we're not doing. That's going to get birthed
Yeah.
out of this.
Yeah.
I know you've called people to what's your calling?
You got it.
Talk about it. What's behind that?
I know everyone has a heartburn, and it's our job to really fan that into that spark that's in people, to fan that into flame, and to watch this place burn spiritually, like the fire of the Lord being in this place, where people around the community just say, I want to be a part of that fire. Like there's something happening there. I see that coming into our future because of this.
Yeah, and those are the things that I get excited about, because we've already had people come forward.
Absolutely.
You've talked about the person who's come forward and said, this is what I'm going through. I want to help people who's going through this.
Yes.
Sometimes it requires resources, sometimes it just requires time. But I get excited about us as a church body having so many people convicted on a calling, and then putting their money where their mouth is and saying, I'm going to also support somebody else's calling, or my calling, or our calling, or maybe not. You know, I don't know how God's going to work. It's just, I know that He is.
I'm just tired of our culture not allowing the church to have a seat at the table anymore. And I sense this is our opportunity to be so alive and so contagious with the joy that the Lord is doing in and through us together as one, that we really are invited to a seat at the table again, where we change culture rather than just being a part of the flow of culture going wherever culture goes. And so let's change that paradigm. this is our opportunity to do that.
Yeah, let's rise up. Rise up.
Thanks, you guys, for taking this time today. I'm sure it's bearing a lot of fruit already. Do you have any final thoughts as we wrap this up?
I'm excited to see how God's going to use, who was it, Wesley said, give me 100 people committed to Christ and I'll change the world. We have, hundreds of people that call Cornerstone their home. And I'm excited to see what happens when hundreds of people that call Cornerstone their home, when we all say we are one body, one group, gonna give, and we're gonna commit, and we're going all in for 2022. Watch how the world changes. And so I can't wait to see the response from people who pray and then are obedient to what the Holy Spirit prompts them to do. So step back, it's gonna be good.
I'm excited about people who maybe have been sitting on the sidelines in this lane for a while, coming alive, challenging themselves. The person who maybe has asked the question why, like I've asked, the person who's been reluctant. My answer to that person is, you're important. And it's not because of your money, it's because you're part of us. And I can't wait to hear your story about what God's doing in your life because of this step that you might take. And so I'm excited about that person.
Yeah. And as we've alluded to, the issue of this is such a spiritual matter for people to love Jesus more because of taking this step of courage into commitment into his church, and to say, I'm a part of something, as you said, bigger than myself, and to be a part of this great wave of revival that is coming because of what's happening here in our small local church called Cornerstone. Thanks, you guys. This has been awesome.